Greetings comic lovers, and it's time to chat casually about Night Terrors, the DC horror event happening in July. I don't know what happened behind the scenes to make so that the timing shook out this way. Also, it would have interrupted less of the ongoing titles that just started. Some of them just started in the dawn of DC. If it had dropped around Halloween. Green Lantern had 2 issues, and then it had to stop to do this event. Night Terror, spelled with a KN to make you think about Batman, and Batman does appear to be featuring prominently within, is a story about nightmares. People trapped in nightmares, then you, the reader, get to go and look at what those nightmares are. They announced this event a while back when they were teasing the new slate of Dawn of DC, and they had that timeline that was slowly being unveiled, and this was the summer event. In all fairness, now this one is dropping, it does have a very clear to follow what's coming out each week chart, which is appreciated. So if you want to follow along, for the most part, it's going to be 2 issues. They're doing the 1-2 punch like they did with Future State or Convergence. That format works very well when it comes time to collect. It varies upon how it goes while it's rolling out on the monthly. It also varies how well each book incorporates the event into their overall structure. We're going to see a variety of approaches for the books that were ongoing because there's some stuff that wasn't. This week I actually read everything, and it hurt. This event, it intrigues me a little bit. I know in many ways it's a bit of a basic concept and not something that's lighting the world on fire, but it sounded like it had the potential to be fun and I wanted to check it out, so I did. I'm part of the problem. Also, spoilers, spoiler city. I'm gonna be spoiling these stories, so if you don't want to know anything, get out now. Your time to leave is now. Just abort mission. This is gonna be a chat for people who either don't care about spoilers or have already read the stuff. This is just gonna be a very casual, generalized chatting about my rough thoughts after very recently reading them. So it's not gonna get like really in-depth and in there, but it's just gonna be a casual chit chat. That's what these are for. There was also a bit of a primer released on Free Comic Book Day. It was with Damian, and there's a little follow-up. I started with First Blood, and that's the one, if you're trying to follow along, this is a good place to start because it gives you your foundation, your base. You're gonna see what's going on. This one is written by Joshua Williamson, who's orchestrating the whole event, and the art is by Howard Porter. The art style in this, it really works for some scenes and less so for others, unless you're a really big fan of Porter's just general style. It's very loose on the perspectives and some of the faces and some of the angles, and that works very well for the nightmare and dream sequences and some of the battle sequences, but when the characters are just kind of standing around, it can be a bit off-putting, almost surreal-esque. So it's gonna vary on how that lands for you. So what's going on? Well, Dr. Destiny, John D, is in his dream when all of a sudden it's interrupted and becomes a nightmare because there's a new villain on the loose named Insomnia. I'm laying that out early. They don't reveal that until later on in the issue, but this is Insomnia. And he's looking for something called the Nightmare Stone. Dr. Destiny has the Dream Stone, apparently had a Nightmare Stone, but he hid it inside the minds of one of his enemies. So that's the premise of how they have to go hopping and looking for it. Which appreciated. That's a good reason to have to hop around. So there's a disturbance at the Hall of Justice that is now a tourist attraction after they rebuilt it because the Justice League disbanded for a bit, even though they're going to come back. And right now the focus is supposed to be on Dick and the Teen Titans over in Bloodhaven. But there are people touring the Hall of Justice and there's something strange inside. And that summons the Trinity because what happened is inside a secret locked area that only the 3 of them have access to. So Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, they show up to see what's going on. And there are just some really nice things. They're really small things that shouldn't be worth noting, but they are. The fact that they reference what's going on in Superman and Batman series. There's just a line like, oh, I'm glad to see that you're back after Failsafe, and oh, I heard that you teamed up and working with Lex right now. It's such a little thing, but it helps make the universe feel connected, and it's been a while time for recording since there's been a focus on that, and it's rewarding. If you are reading a lot of the titles, it just makes it feel like the universe is bigger, and if you're not, it may just make you want to check something out, or it just makes it feel like there's more going on. For me, it's noted and appreciated. There are also, it must be noted, editor's notes, so if they reference a certain thing, there's gonna be a this happened here. It might not give the exact issue number, but it does tell you what run it is and where to go, and again, that's noted and appreciated. Now, a lot of what's going on in this is being observed by Deadman, Boston Brand, and so he gives you a bit of a rundown in his perspective of Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman. And once you get into his voice, so to speak, it's pretty fun. And this is a good place for Deadman. It makes sense for him to be here. So once the 3 get together, they see that the body of Dr. Destiny is there. Oh my goodness, how did it get here? Why is he here? How is he dead? But then Batman gets a call from Harley, who hacks his comms because Harley is still very much in her I can do anything phase. And she calls to say that she's at Arkham Tower and there's a problem with Dr. Destiny. So he's still there, but how? He seems to be trapped in some kind of nightmare. And so the Trinity split up to try and go and do different things. Wonder Woman's gonna go get Zatanna to check the magic angle. Batman's gonna go to the tower and deal with Arkham and Harley and Dr. Destiny, all of that stuff. Superman's gonna go to Supercorp and his resources that he now has from his book and try and figure out if he can help in that way. It's when Batman ends up at Arkham Tower that things all go wrong, and the nightmare realm seems to spill out of Dr. Destiny, and we're introduced to Insomnia, who then unleashes this kind of nightmare upon the world. And that also happens through the body that was at the Hall of Justice, which is some kind of nightmare construct. So then you start to see everybody starts to fall asleep, and the person whose dream you start to be pulled into is Batman's, and you get that kind of dead boy detective look that they gave him, and then it tells you to follow along in Night Terrors. For a setup, this was pretty solid and it was pretty fun. There are lots of little references to overall things, like there's a line about dream and death being related that Deadman says, and that's a Sandman reference, and there's just all kinds of little things that make it feel very rewarding if you are all up in the DC lore. It was more solidly contained and grounded than I expected it to be, and it gave you a reason for why you were going to be hopping around, and so then it just sets up, okay, now it's time for the nightmares. Do they need to be doing another event right now? Probably not, but it seems like it's setting itself up to be one of the more fun ones, and at least it feels like the tie-ins are gonna tie in better or more, or at least have a fun premise. Let's see how creative people get with it. But that was that one. So then, because we already saw Dead Boy Detective Batman, I figured might as well go to Batman next. Night Terrors Batman #1, which is not written by Chip Zdarsky, but also by Joshua Williamson, and his art by Guillaume March. It starts with a bit of a flashback about Batman submerging himself in this tank for this deprivation so he can deal with his innermost nightmares, so that he'll be prepared for if one day somebody tries to use that against him. He's there for 24 hours, and it's just his parents getting killed by Joe Chill over and over and over again. So that's our setup. Then we flash to now, where he's trapped in this nightmare, but he's fully aware that he's trapped in there. And so this one, you get to play with some cool imagery. They go pretty dark here. They go down some avenues that you may have seen in, say, Batman the Animated Series. That episode where he's running after his parents, the one where he gets dosed in Scarecrow's Fear Talks and he's in Arkham, and then you see him running towards his parents in his dream sequence, and then the alley that they're walking into turns into the barrel of a gun. That was an intense sequence. You have some stuff like that in this, like he almost gets crushed by giant versions of his mother's pearls. He goes into the theater, and there he sees why he can't wake up, because he's trying to force himself out. But in the meantime, in First Blood, Deadman took over his body and is fighting in it. So now he's trapped inside of his own body. He needs to force Deadman out so that he can wake up. And again, that theater scene, very Stargirl. He has to reach in and go inside of it. I feel like everybody saw that Shade season of Stargirl and were like, yes, this theater scene, perfection. For the most part, it's pretty standard. He sees all of the graves of all of his loved ones, but he's not really falling for it or being taken aback. Even when Insomnia shows up, and it is a pretty good design of him in the Robin costume, it just looks very wrong. The most extra out there imagery is probably when Bruce throws up this bat that has a gun for a head, and it's so extra, and it worked for me. I know it shouldn't have, because it was just trying so hard, but I liked it. I thought it was a cool image. This bat shoots him, and it turns him into this really cool version of the bat costume. It is really sweet. So he goes off to try and gain control of his nightmare, but then suddenly he's Joe Chill. Wait for part 2. Now for the more random tie-ins, like Black Adam by Jeremy Hahn. For most of this, I was just wondering why Black Adam was a character that they chose to spotlight. It just feels like there was a big Black Adam push, and it felt like it tied into when the movie was coming out or around then, and this idea they were going to try and push Black Adam. But that happens every now and again at DC anyway. They have to remember that Black Adam is a character and pull him out. This one was a very quick read. It was pretty much at the start that Kandak's being attacked, Black Adam is there, he falls into the nightmare that's engulfing the world, and then it's just him running around this nightmare, and his powers are kind of wonky. At one point they go away. It takes him 2 Shazams to get back into his Black Adam form. He's talking to this cat that looks like Bast, but it's all sassy and talking modern. Now the cat is trying to get him to go to these multiple towers to look for something, which is probably the Nightmare Stone, because Insomnia is hopping through all these dreams looking for this Nightmare Stone. And suddenly, after seeing this horrific slaughter of his loved ones, Black Adam stumbles upon Batman, who's in his dream. There really isn't much to say about this one. It's very standard by rote. It's what you'd expect. It doesn't have any kind of really trippy visuals or anything like First Blood did or the Batman one. For me, I would say if you love Black Adam, pick it up, or if you're going to be some kind of completionist, you need all the Night Terrors. But other than that, it's one of the ones that And anything Black Adam does, I'm sure they'll explain it when he needs to be important. Oh, That just reminds me, wow, I forgot. They have a whole Damian section where he's traveling, trying to decipher the dream that he had at the end of Night Terror's Batman. And there's this hint that he's uncovered what Insomnia is truly after and that there's a danger there. And he's able to keep himself awake. And then it tells you to check back in at Night Terrors number 3. Anyway, the other issues. Night Terrors, Poison Ivy. This one by G. Willow Wilson, who is writing the main series. Art by Adigan Ilhan. Poison Ivy's nightmare is pretty much what you'd expect it to be. If you know about the Poison Ivy character, just in general, you don't even need to be following her run and what she's doing now with her whole eat the rich, we're gonna take down the rich kind of thing, which again is very in keeping with the history of her character. It's what you'd expect. It's suburbia, it's a Stepford Wives-ish thing, it's Harley there with this white picket fence house. And the thing with this one is it has a lot of narration boxes that are trying to be profound about how what you think you want is really a nightmare, but it's very targeted towards that idea of the traditional white picket fence type of thing. But the thing is, that's not something that Poison Ivy wants. And so that part kind of falls flat, but there are some lines that work. But also this is interesting because even though Ivy can tell something's off, it seems that Harley is there and that Harley is happy, so she's trying to give it a shot. You only vaguely see Insomnia in this one in one of the houses, but the imagery in this one is pretty surreal, and then it gets into that cutesy grotesque as it goes on. So from an art standpoint, it's fascinating. There are some fun images like Batman there with his mask on because she doesn't know who Batman is, so he's there barbecuing with his mask on as a next door neighbor. They managed to sneak a caked up Nightwing in there. The one element that may be confusing for people who aren't following Poison Ivy series is that Janet from HR shows up, who is a character that's featured prominently in that run, and she's there trying to pull Ivy out of the dream and getting attacked by all the other dream constructs. And there's this whole line about how there's nothing worse than being trapped in someone else's nightmare, which I'm not sure. That could be debatable, but I'm also not sure why Janet is inside of Ivy's, but maybe that'll be answered in the next part. It was, again, pretty standard, what you'd expect, but some of the art made it pretty fun. Next issue, The Joker, Matthew Rosenberg and Stefano Raphael. So this story right off the bat, it's got the energy of the Joker Man Who Laughs backup stories, but minus some of the Silver Age zany and with that different art style that's transitioned into over time. That really does it a lot of favors. Some of the jokes land better now that it's just embracing being dark humor. This is a kind of dark tongue-in-cheek, and let's try to play with that Silver Age tinge, which it never fully grasped. So the Joker's nightmare is that he's there, Gaggy is there, but we don't have all the other sidekicks from the backup. And this one is actually pretty good because it subtly eases you into it, and if you were just reading Matthew Rosenberg's stories, it would fit in well with the flow of that. In playing in that kind of what's going on, can you trust what's happening, because all of a sudden they're there and Batman trips and dies and falls off of a roof, and you know what? It's kind of funny. The whole thing about the Jokers is that all of a sudden things become incredibly easy for him in the life of crime, and so he has to end up getting a corporate job, and he's trying to do all of these, he's trying to do anything to cause mayhem, be it dark or just kind of silly, and everybody's ignoring him. Nothing works. They just treat him like an entirely normal person no matter what he does. And you know what? That is pretty funny. For this one, a lot of the comedy lands. Yeah, it's a lot of like corporate humor and haha, trapped working a corporate job, but it works. It's not high art or anything, but it is chuckle-worthy. Insomnia features more prominently in this one. He talks the Joker a decent amount, but there's not really any talk about the Nightmare Stone or the Joker having to find it. This one plays it very much like a surreal comedic take on the Legends of the Dark Knight story Going Sane, where after it appears that Batman is gone, Joker just ends up going back to having a regular life, and then he goes insane again after Batman reappears. In this, Batman is seemingly dead because he's hanging his corpse in his closet, but then he shows up again. And so it makes it feel just very topsy-turvy. On the whole, this one worked. So yeah, props, recovery from Pregnant Joker. This one was clever and felt like it was trying less hard. All right, the last one from this week. Ravager, written by Ed Brisson, art Dexter Soy. This one was entirely competent, but I don't know, I think I liked it the least out of all of them. It was Ravager awakens in this nightmare. She doesn't realize that it's a nightmare, because not everybody does, and so she's there, and then there's this alternate version of herself, another version of her, a Rose Madison, who instead of growing up in a brothel is growing up in a foster home, and her parents are being killed by what she calls the Murder Man, who seems to be some kind of version of Deathstroke. And so Rose is trying to save this alternate version of herself and getting close to her, and then she's betrayed because actually this Murder Man is looking for a conduit out into the real world, someone who has their foot in both worlds, and that's Rose. And so her dream version of herself Trickster, there's something very dark there. It was very straightforward. The Rose alternate tells you what this villain's plan is, how they're trying to break out, and then they start to try, and then you see that Ravager is asleep on the ground and they're about to wake her up with Stormwatch, but they don't, and then it's going to be continued in the next issue. It was a very quick read. Of all of them, this was the quickest. The Murderman design was pretty cool, but also very reminiscent of other generic monsters you've seen in Nightmares. This one was very middle of the road. It also didn't really feel like it built much tension as to, oh no, this person is going to come forward into the real world, because it's not quite clear why that would be a bad thing yet in comparison to all of the other things that are happening in the real world with the Nightmares. Perhaps it'll feel a bit more urgent with Night Terrors #1, which happens in the next bunch. But as it stands for this first crop, it didn't really bring the urgency. So that was the first bunch. First Blood, definitely worth it. Fun, set it up, good to go. The Batman one had some pretty cool art, so the Poison Ivy one. I think for many, this is just gonna depend on how much of a completionist you are and which characters you like. I get the vibe that this will collect very well. Like, this would be a very fun Omni or trade to have with them all together. But in terms of how it plays as it comes out month to month, that's gonna be a very different vibe. I still feel like it should have been in October. I feel like it would have hit a bit harder, even if the stories were the same in October, because it would have been boosted by the spooky vibe. Maybe that's when the trades are coming. So they'd be like, ooh, spooky, scary, omnibus. I'm sure the price will be spooky and scary. But I want to hear from you. Are you enjoying Night Terrors? Have you read it? Which ones were your fave? If you were enjoying it at all, do you wish it wasn't happening? Are you sad it's interrupting the books you are reading? Just tell me things. I want to hear it. How do you feel about it? Let's chit chat. Talk to me. As always, there'll be more videos coming soon. Some more in-depth stuff, some more casual stuff, some more random stuff. You never know what you're gonna get. Thanks so much for taking some time today discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Do the YouTube things. If I didn't say it, like, share, comment, subscribe. Okay, bye-bye.